Thank you, everyone. I know we're the last presentation of the day, so we've got a lot of exciting content for you in store, so we'll get to it. So just first off, like a brief rundown of what we're going to cover today. First off, I'm going to introduce MIFOS. Most of you are familiar with that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the digital public goods we maintain, and then also speak to the digital public infrastructure that helps to enable, looking more closely at core banking than our payment orchestration. And then I'm going to pass it over to David here, who's going to do a deeper dive on the digital public good efforts and harmonizing interoperability amongst these DPGs to enable effective G2P. But first off, just a little bit about ourselves. I think most of you know me as I've been at a number of convenings, but wanted to properly introduce David, as he's been very active in our community the past 8 to 9 months, helping to oversee and program manage our GovStack initiative. And so he's got decades of experience managing enterprise level projects. So happy he's here. He's here at his first convening. And then real quick, those are some of the animals that I'm leaving back home. And then just about MIFOS, I think most of you are quite familiar with us, but we're a 501c3. We maintain a number of digital public goods, but I think the key point to emphasize is we're aiming to commoditize core banking software and really focus on growing our ecosystem and creating a virtuous cycle of upstream contribution back into the digital public good. And then just also wanted to more properly introduce the consortium that helped to deliver on the GovStack requirements. So it's made up of a number of different integrators across our MIFOS community. So you see David there. We have a couple of the team from FinTechionda who helped on the UI. And then the core of the GovStack efforts were led by Finnerfin on the development side based in India. And then Kareem and Soban from Paces Labs in Pakistan, who led the efforts around designing and implementing the APIs and all of the processes that David's going to go through later. And so first off, I just wanted to set the stage about how our digital public goods help to enable effective digital public infrastructure. So first off, we're helping to advance the adoption of inclusive instant payment systems by helping to connect last mile non-banking institutions. And then secondly, we're also helping to enable effective G2P payments by enabling disbursement into functional wallet and transactional accounts. And by combining these two, you'll see how we can enable widespread, meaningful financial inclusion, which I'll touch on the subsequent slides. So just real quick, in terms of the digital public goods that MIFOS maintains, they fall into two categories. On the left-hand side there, payment orchestration at both the government as well as the DFSP level. And then on the right-hand side, core banking, providing a full core banking system that's completely open source to manage any type of institution, whether it's an MFI, SACO, a large bank, a fintech, a wallet provider, along with the reference mobile apps to deliver customer-facing services as well. And so to set the stage around how we help to enable disbursement of effective G2P payments, wanted to touch upon some key aspects that the World Bank highlights on their design of modern G2P architecture. In this paper that they published, I think more than 30 times they mention the importance of a functional account or a transaction account. And that's exactly what MIFOS can provide and go much beyond that, beyond just transactions, but also loans, savings, and other accounts that can get added on top of that. And this is just another look at their architecture and where MIFOS and Payment Hub fits in. And then I'll go through these slides pretty quickly, but you can look at them after the convening. But first off, the G2P Connect initiative, they have a solution blueprint that looks how different digital public goods can be brought together to enable effective G2P payments. And so this view right here shows how Mojaloop fits in, how MIFOS fits in amongst the different layers around payments, last mile delivery, and we'll talk more about this subsequently. I wanted to pause here for a moment, as this is a slide that I presented before, but I want to reframe it in a different light this time. So the point I wanted to emphasize here is that digital public infrastructure, it extends across the entire ecosystem. So the slide was going to build up just showing that there's, of course, a focus centrally at the government in needing an actual payment system or an ID system centrally at the government. But a key part of the digital public goods that fulfills the entire digital public infrastructure landscape is also those systems that the DFSPs need to maintain to be able to either connect into a payment system or to be able to act as those destination accounts for G2P payments. And that's where MIFOS fits in, both at the account layer and the app layer. And so this is a concept I've spoken about before, but between Mifos and Mojaloop, you have an end-to-end architecture that's fully open source, built on digital public goods, where you can build the underlying payment infrastructure, as well as that connective tissue at the API and account level to enable any type of DFSP to connect into the payment system. And then I'll just go over these slides briefly, but wanted to emphasize that with Mifos, it is a full core banking system. It has everything you need to manage any type of financial institution. But I want to highlight specifically the different types of accounts that can be offered, including loans, savings accounts, pension accounts, share accounts, and I'll touch upon this later on a subsequent slide. So I wanted to call out two real-world examples of adoption of the core banking system this past year at both the public and private sector level, which really helped to emphasize and go back to the panel yesterday around how we can drive down the cost of payments to make payment systems instant as well as inclusive. So the first project is called the Pepper Soup Project. We're not able to mention the customer by name at this time, but the customer is a large Fortune 500 global fintech. And we embarked on a multi-year project to re-platform their loan management system of record from Temenos and onto Fineract. And I think the key takeaways are the cost savings we're able to achieve for them. So for them, they actually stated that now their core banking for loan management is merely a rounding error. So it's 95% cheaper per loan using Fineract as opposed to Temenos. They estimate that over 5 years between the two products they're going to migrate, they can save over $230 million. And then at a performance level, there's been a notable increase in performance in terms of being able to not have the customer drop off when they're taking out a loan online due to the increased performance of the system. And so I think just the capabilities we're able to demonstrate through this project in terms of the massive scalability, opening 200,000 loan accounts a day, 100 million loan accounts a year, and the massive cost savings we're able to achieve can trickle back down to helping to distinguish how core banking doesn't need to be looked at as an expensive item. It can be commoditized software, and that's a key part of the cost equation that can be cut out of the costs that need to be passed on in a payment system. And then one other project I want to highlight is at the public sector level. This is led by Infotech, which is the public software development center of the government of Mexico. So we've been working very closely with them as they've been implementing a customized version of Fineract and Mifos called CB. And this is a view of just like the overall system landscape, but we provided the core banking and loan management aspect. But the scenario I want to focus on here is that they've launched a countrywide financial inclusion lending program that just went live 2 weeks ago across all 1,700 branches across the country and is fully digital online. And then they're also aiming to replace the debit accounts for a majority of the systems to better provide alternatives to the commercial banks. And so in this case, it's a pretty unique example where the government is actually implementing digital public goods to provide the infrastructure for both lending as well as debit and transactional accounts. And one other project they're potentially looking at are person-to-government payments, which I think is a key use case that can help to drive transaction volume for Mojaloop as well. But we're very excited about this project demonstrating DPI at the government level. And these are just some of the screenshots of the mobile app. And so now that I've looked at core banking, just wanted to touch upon the digital public goods we provide for payment orchestration. So most of you are familiar with Payment Hub, but it provides a flexible, extensible, open source engine to orchestrate your payment flows. So it's agnostic of whatever core banking system you're using. It's agnostic of the payment system you're using, but it provides a highly flexible orchestration engine to connect into a system like Mojaloop, execute transactions from your channels, bring in fraud management data, connect your core banking system. And most of you know the benefits, but we've designed it to be scalable, easy to use, provide that operational control center, and hopefully this aligns with the work stream being discussed right now around the community needs for DFSP participation. And this is just an example of the executable BPMN diagram where you just define your connectors and workers, and this actually executes the transaction flows. And the purple or the orange boxes here are the Mojaloop APIs, and the purple boxes are the Fineract API flows. I'll skip over this, but the main point here was the system Payment Hub is core banking and payment system agnostic, so very flexible in connecting. And this is a slide I spoke about before, but wanted to bring it up again because I think it helps to demonstrate the combination between core banking and a DFSP participation tool, whereby you can have a system that can enable last mile institutions to connect in at a low cost, do this in a multi-tenant manner, which I'll talk about in our vision for shared infrastructure. But I think this played out in Myanmar, where a good majority of the institutions there were using systems that were based on Fineract APIs, and that helped with the connection into Mojaloop for the WinePay system. And then lastly, just around the payment hub, although we don't have any production deployments within the Mojaloop ecosystem, it is production ready, as there are a number of key deployments worldwide where it's being used in production. So in Mexico, our partner there connected with Cody for QR code-based payments. One of our partners, Baseflow in Europe, has just gotten certified by the National Bank to connect into the SEPA instant and fast-based payment systems. The same partner in Mexico also connected into Pix for fast cash, a fintech there. And then we've also replaced all of the M-Pesa connections that were previously on Bionic for 1Acre Fund for all of their lending portfolio. And then before I pass it on to David, I just wanted to showcase a bit our vision of the art of what's possible around shared infrastructure. And so we fully believe that you can deliver in the cloud as a hosted solution, modern infrastructure that can enable digitization of the core, connection into digital payments, digital channels and transformation, and also enable data science for good, like AI decisioning, effective reporting, as well as real-time fraud detection and monitoring. And the key goal of this is to leverage the economies of scale, deliver in the cloud as SaaS service, and reduce those costs such that last mile institutions connect in. And the key part here is just you need to partner with a local association that could create that top level demand, and then the local service provider to deliver it. But the service does need to be sustainable. And then I just wanted to close upon having this blueprint for shared infrastructure. So at the foundational level of the blueprint is digital public infrastructure. And it's not just the technology in terms of the digital public goods, but it's also the policy and enablement coming from governments, regulators, and funders. And then at the second level, the pyramid around distribution and innovation, you need that network effect from the local associations, but you also have to work closely with the local system integrator who can do the deployment, do the training, do the localization and the support. And then this culminates with impact in terms of financial health, as well as local long-lasting impact on the economy. And just to bring that to life, gave a theoretical example, taking into account some of the factors of People's Clearinghouse in Mexico, where you could have at the DPG level, MIFOS, Mojaloop deployed. You've got the endorsement of stakeholders like Banco de Mexico. And then at the association level, you have AMUCs, and then the local integrators that are doing the innovation and building the solution are People's Clearinghouse, entities like Infotech or Fintech Yando. And then the end result that they're aiming to achieve is disbursement of remittances into accounts that can keep that money local. There can be local lending, local transactions, and all that money stays local. So now I'm going to pass it on to David. At the last convening, we talked about the ongoing efforts to align different digital public goods for interoperability to enable effective G2P. And he's going to speak to our efforts over the past 6 months in regards to that and do a demo of what's possible in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It's great to be here. It's my first time at Mojaloop, and it's been great to meet you all so far. First thing I want to just highlight is an area that we're actually going to be investing in. We started investing in, which is our lab environment. So we've had a lab environment for a couple of years now, but we've recognized that there's a real need out there to be able to demo our DPGs and the other DPGs that need to work together within digital public infrastructure. And so as part of that, we're envisioning this lab environment, which we're going to build, which will enable many target audiences to be able to participate, build their own demos, sample demos that we've got on there, and also be able to use it for development as well. So this gives sort of a high-level overview of what that environment will look like. The grey boxes show where these could link to other sandbox environments or other lab environments where we might want to link in. For example, you can see the Mojaloop Oracle would link into the account mapper. We'd have a core Mojaloop instance within the environment, but we also plan to link to things such as MoSIP and OpenG2P directly within the lab environment. The other bit you'll notice at the bottom is the mobile applications, because we believe this lab environment to be really demonstrable, needs to help show the whole end-to-end journey and user experience at the end. So we will be enabling the integration into mobile applications. I'll skip over this. This is in the deck you can look at afterwards. Some of the items we're looking at in that roadmap as we take it forwards. The other thing I do want to highlight, Elijah here and Tom Daly, who isn't here this time, have been working with us as we're going through this lab environment. And we really see the work that Elijah's been doing in the Google Summer of Code around the Modulphos quick deployment as being key to this lab environment. So we've been having discussions about how we can do it, because it really simplifies the deployment. So if we're setting up within the lab environment multiple quick instances that developers can play with, we see this as being a key component. And it's a good demonstration of the value of what's come out of Moduloop so far. So now I'll turn towards the GovStack deliverables. Just briefly to give you an overview of what GovStack is. GovStack is an ITU program that has defined a building a block approach to create a single digital infrastructure to try and get away from the problems that have occurred in some countries where you have multiple stacks and therefore large investment costs, but to get to much more building block approach where government ministries could choose the building blocks they need within the use cases. Within this, we've been working within the payment building block, not surprisingly, and we have been focusing on a number of different areas within this. The payments building block is an isolated building block. It talks to other parties as needed. So, for example, one of the other building blocks is the ID building block, which a MOSIP implementation is being put into. So what is the architecture of this building block? So within the payments building block, it looks at having an account mapper functionality. That is absolutely key, because within the GovStack definition, the payment details, the bank account details must be only accessible by the payments building block. So it's not held elsewhere, it's within there or within an Oracle it can reference. So we've also looked at a voucher engine and a voucher API specification. And we've been looking at making sure the flows from a registration system, such as OpenG2P or other systems that are implemented within GovStack, and identity from MOSIP integrate in. What is the impact of what we've been doing with GovStack? Well, one of the things GovStack has done is create a sandbox environment. And the reason for that sandbox environment is they want to be able to very quickly demonstrate as they go out and engage with countries, the building blocks around it. And that is, similar model to what we're now expanding out in our lab environment with a wider DPG integration. We think that will really drive more engagement with other DPGs, not just our own. So looking at switches and such with Moduloop. I have a lot of slides here and I will flick through them. You will find there's links on each of these slides you can look at afterwards. And the purpose of this is so that you can actually see some more of the detail. And if you want to interact with us on that detail, we'd really welcome it. So as we say, we've developed an ID account mapper and launched it. And the link at the bottom gives more details on that. We've taken the bulk processing capabilities from Payment Hub and enhanced them. So what it can take is a bulk file. It can look at that against the account mapper, work out what DFSPs are associated with each of the transactions, and create sub batches that then can be transmitted off towards the relevant DFSPs. We've also, as I said, looked at the voucher engine. So we've created a definition and an API specification for integrating with voucher engines, as that's seen as a need in some of the countries that GovStack is working with. We've also updated the payments portal UI, and we'll come on to a bit more bigger screenshots later. But the real thing we realized was that our UI was a little outdated, needed to be updated to incorporate the new functionality, such as being able to look at vouchers, being able to look at the account mapper, And this is the admin UI that would be used by the systems administrator for Payment Hub. We've also looked quite extensively at the P2G use case, because that's seen as quite key moving forwards. We've looked at different options that need to be supported within that. And again, what I do is point you to the documentation or have a conversation with myself or any of the team. Kareem is here as well, who's been involved in this, to talk more about that P2G offline. So where next for GovStack? So the GovStack is a product council, just like Moduloop, that's currently deciding where the next effort needs to be expended. But very much the feeling that's been garnered within that is that more direct engagement with the countries. You'll probably have seen that they're now actively engaging in multiple countries each month to build up the use cases. And the gaps that are identified in those use cases will go back into those fundamental building blocks to be developed. So things such as government-to-government payments, government-to-business and business-to-government payments have already been identified that would need to be done within the payments fundamental building block. The other area of harmonization we've been looking at is G2P Connect. So with G2P Connect, there is some similarities to GovStack. GovStack and G2P Connect have actually been talking as they go through the processes. So for example, in G2P Connect, they are already fully compliant on registration and source building block with the GovStack specification. So there's no changes that are needed there. However, for G2P flows, the G2P Connect specification is quite wide-ranging and has a number of different options. So what we've been doing as part of the co-develop funding that we've had is look at our APIs, which are now GovStack compliant, and work out what needs to be adjusted or have an adapter, which we refer to as the wrapper layer in this slide, to enable G2P Connect flows to go through it. We're having some quite interesting discussions on that. So one of the things G2P Connect allows is a lot more data to be transmitted. And so there's quite an interesting discussion at the moment about, does the wrapper layer need to retain data to be able to put back into the transactions as it goes back and forth? And I think people can probably think of the logistical headache of large data lakes and GDPR associated with that. So if you want to join that discussion, we'd welcome it, and the link is on there as well. The other part we've been doing with G2P Connect is going through their technical assessment framework. For those of you that are not aware, they've engaged an external independent assessor who is looking at DPGs and their fit against the G2P Connect structure that Ed outlined earlier. We've submitted into that with all our DPGs and the enhancements we have done recently in GovStack. And we've seen an early draft. It's due to be released very soon. We think it's reasonably accurate on the strengths it's identified, but also it's identified a few gaps that we need to focus on as well to be more holistic, and that's now feeding into our roadmap. You know, one of the things we're very keen to do is start better integration with fraud and risk management to make a more holistic system. Then what we wanted to do, so we talked about the lab environment earlier, and on that, we're going to have some demos. And what I want to give you is an early preview of a demo that's going to be very soon live on that lab environment. So the objective of this environment is to show that end-to-end transaction flow. It's a G2P Connect, sorry, it's a transaction of UCST, unconditional social cash transfer, that will flow through the system. So this is the demo architecture. You can see it maps pretty much back to that lab environment we had earlier. We've created a central bank instance, the Central Bank of Wakanda. We've got Moduloop acting as the switch in the middle. We've got Payment Hub as the orchestration in both the payer and the payee instances. And then we've got a number of Fineract instances that are representing bank account providers or MoMo operators. We're also linking up the mobile applications to this, so you can actually see the transaction flows. So within this, we have to do some setup first of all with the demo environment. So we've set up 2 ministries within the government of Wakanda. One is social welfare and the other is Ministry of Health. And then we've identified 3 programs that those ministries would actually have. One is educational, one is unconditional cash transfer, and one is maternity benefits. And we associate the account details of those programs that are going to pay the entities out. We've also, on the payee DFSPs, up a number of different accounts. You can see them represented by the zeros down there. The 100,000s are the ministry bank accounts at the top. What you'll notice in there is there's multiple accounts on each of the DFSPs. So what this will be able to demonstrate is that sub-batching approach as the transactions flow through. Then what we need to do is do the registration element. So this is the first thing that happened when the beneficiaries are registered into the program. That will go through the register beneficiary API we developed into the account mapper. So that will take the functional ID, which could be a MOSIP ID or any other ID. It is unique to the beneficiary on that program. So if you're a beneficiary of more than one program, you'll have more than one functional ID. We map against that the account details or the alias. In this case, you can see we're using both bank account and mobile numbers, and that's stored into the account mapper. So in this demo, what you'll be able to see is the account mapper screen first of all would be empty. It shows no details stored in that account mapper. And then as we push that flow through the API, you see it populate with the account details stored in the ID account mapper for the UI. We then run a series of bulk transactions, bulk interface. These would be payments from those programs we identified to functional IDs. As you can see, the bank account details are not transferred here in any form. When that goes into the system, it looks up the bank account associated with the functional ID, and it will split them down into sub-batches. So what you can see is the main batch that's come in. You can see the sub-batches screen, and you can also see the specific transfers on the transfer screen underneath to give the full flow. And then finally, what you'll be able to see is the end balances, having gone through both the debits to the government accounts and the credits to the payee accounts. This can also be seen through the Fineract core banking UI. So here's the core banking UI that will show those credits in. And what we'll also do is be able to demonstrate it through mobile applications, landing into bank accounts. And then what we want to do is extend that to be able to show transactions occurring between those mobile applications once the funds have been delivered. And I will pass back to Ed for talk about what next. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, I know we're over time, so thanks, Simeon. But just real quick in terms of what next and what we're aiming to hopefully collaborate with others in the community. So Elijah is going to be completing his Mojafos project. We also had another intern working on a PISP app project that's going to soon be completed. Like Paul Baker and Sam mentioned earlier, we hope to work together more closely around the MOSIP Mifos Mojaloop use case. And then we're looking to be more deeply involved in the merchant work stream, as well as what's going on with bulk payments, the Fraud and Risk Management Center of Excellence, testing out VNext, which Elijah's already incorporated into Mojafos. And then, like David mentioned, rolling out this lab environment, and then also having deeper integration with the beneficiary management systems like OpenG2P. And then lastly, at the community level, we've been really impressed with how much traction and how much the accelerator programs and all the POCs are achieving. So want to work more closely with those teams. And then lastly, we really hope to work tightly with the Mifos or the Mojaloop community to help to achieve Co-Develop Fund's goals of 50 and 5 around DPI adoption amongst 50 countries in the next 5 years. So thank you, everybody.